I love actors. I really do. I spend most of my time with them. If I'm not with Trish or Wally, I am in the classroom. I'm coaching, I'm training, I'm mentoring. And, if you spent the last 31 episodes with me, you understand that. But I love the serious actors, the actors that playful out with themselves, the actors that operate outside their comfort zone, the actors that are willing to put in the time and the hard work to learn craft and technique. The actors that understand that if you want to consistently be able to create organic, vivid, fully realized human behavior, you better have a way of working. The actors that put their soul on the line, that operate outside their comfort zone. The actors that are obsessed with human behavior. And on that note, I thought I would start us off today with a quote from one of my favorite actors, Daniel Kaluuya, who said this: "I don't think I'm entitled to your attention. I have to offer or channel or shape something that's going to make you want to give it to me." And on that note, I hope I can do that for you. So put the phone back in your pocket. Season 2 of Creating Behavior starts now. Well, hello, my fellow daydreamers. Welcome to Creating Behavior. My name is Charlie Sandlan. I did not know when I wrapped up Season 1 back in December when I was going to get back in front of the microphone again. I just thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'll just, see when I'm inspired, when I feel like sitting back down here and talking to you guys. And the time has come. We're heading into spring. And, I don't know about you, but I look at everything now, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And, everyone was talking about heading into 2021. Oh, this is going to be great. New year. We can shake off 2020. It really sucked. I'm sorry. This has still been one big shitburger as far as I'm concerned. We're still dealing with death and virus and masks. And I don't even know what social interaction is anymore. And I spend so much time with my fucking wife, Trish, because we both work from home all day, every day. It's unending. Thank God we like each other. Or it would be really, really rough. But, you can only spend so much time with somebody. So it's me, Trish, and Wally. That's it. We spent a month in Guatemala over the holidays. And, we're grinding it out. I've got my studio online. I've been teaching and coaching. And I had a lot of stuff pile up on my desk. And I thought, well, now's the time to get back to you guys. So, on the personal front, everything's good. Wally's doing great. Trish, oddly enough, Trish's episode, A Face of Anxiety, episode 30, was like the most popular and the most downloaded episode of the entire season. There are thousands of people that, I guess, really need help with anxiety. And it was really, really helpful. So I will definitely bring her back on this season. But let's just get to some stuff, shall we? I mentioned Daniel Kaluuya in the opening, and he's worth talking about. I don't know if you know who he is. If you don't know who he is, you educate yourself here. Watch Get Out, which probably most of you have seen. Watch Queen and Slim, an incredible movie, great performance. And most recently, Judas and the Black Messiah. And that quote came from an article in, I believe it was Entertainment Weekly. But, what I love about it is that he understands that the audience is really the most important part of the cinematic theatrical experience. We've paid good money to sit and consume what it is you're putting out there. And it better be something that's worthwhile, something that's worthy. And the article talks about this table read that they had. They were trying to get an extra $1 million in funding for the film. And so there was a table read, all the actors and, the guest producers and the network and studio and everybody that's involved on the money side sitting around listening to this. And there's this really great scene in the film where, he's in front of this entire crowd and he's speaking, and, it's this really just charged moment where he's, just really at the top of his lungs. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. And Shaka King, who was the director of the film, said that, everybody was sitting around. They were reading a screenplay, but he was reading a play. And in that moment, at the table read, he stood up, and it was as if he was talking to a room full of 500 people right there at the table read. I love it. Shaka said he played it like he was performing in a theater for 300 people, and he had to reach the back row. And to me, that's an actor working, not somebody that's just sitting at a table, reading their lines into their script and referring to the people that are sitting around them, but somebody that's trying to bring something to a table read. And certainly, when I'm training and teaching actors, that's how I think you should approach everything you do, right? Is to make contact, to get it up off the page, and to breathe life into the words, that are written there. And I'll give you another quote of his, because I just have a lot of respect for him. He was talking about all of the work he did on his body to be able to take on the part. He worked with a voice and speech coach. He worked with an opera coach to help him get his breath down in the body, to help him function from his diaphragm, to keep his larynx and his vocal cords from getting shredded. And, he said that he was consumed with honesty over imitation. And that's really challenging when you're playing somebody who actually lived in life. And at the end of the article, he said, I gave it everything I had. I gave and I gave. I mean, what more can you ask for from an actor? And Lena White, writer and one of the producers of the film, said this about him. He was in another place. He was allowing himself to find things that aren't on the page. And that's what you want to be able to do with an actor. That takes imagination. Your ability to read a script and to intuit, to imagine through your own creativity the behavior that's possible. And then to do the homework you need to do so that when, you hear action or you walk up on that stage, the craft shows up, the homework shows up. It's there. It's in your spontaneity. It's in your deep understanding of the character, of the issues. And that's what he can do. And he is carving out a hell of a career. So you should watch his films. You should know who he is. And you should follow him because he's one of the best actors, I think, that are working today. Now, it's also Oscar season, so, the nominations are out. People are talking about particular performances and films. And I just thought I would talk about a couple of the performances that stuck out to me. And, I will just say that, when you are working on a script, what you have to be able to do, I think there are four big things. You have to be able to justify text. You have to be able to create impulses, implant meaning, and do actions, right? This is what goes into breaking down a script. And there are a couple performances where this kind of homework is really well done. And the first performance I want to talk about that has stuck with me is Andra Day in The United States versus Billie Holiday. Now, first off, I have to tell you, I did not know how much the United States government went after her. I mean, really, destroyed her in many ways. Her iconic song, Strange Fruit, about the lynching of a black man. The government didn't want her singing it. So they framed her, they set her up, they put her in prison. God forbid a black woman, sings about lynching. They thought she was inciting violence. So that was news to me. I knew she had died young, 44, from, the effects of heroin. Andra Day's performance is revelatory in many ways, I think. I mean, first, to take on an iconic part, somebody who is kind of, woven into our cultural fabric, is a daunting task. And I can only imagine how scary it would be to take it on, to want to do justice, right, to certainly her life and to what she stood for and what she meant and means to so many people. There's a moment in the film that just, it really got me. It stuck with me, and I thought, man, that is some first-rate homework. The subtext was clear, and it was a real revelatory moment. And it happens later in the film. Billie Holiday, she's in a hotel room, and it's a scene with her and the FBI agent Jimmy Fletcher, played by Trevante Rhodes. And she wants to have sex, so she automatically gets on all fours, her ass is up in the air, and you can tell immediately that this is how, they have always been having sex, and how I think she's been probably having sex her entire life. And when you look back at the earlier sex scenes, they're incredibly violent. I mean, she's being fucked from behind, her throat's being choked, she's being, smashed up against a mirror, and, she's probably been having really violent, sex, right? Most of her adult life. So they start having sex, and then there's a moment where he stops, and he turns her around, and she doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And you can see in this moment, when I talk about implanted meaning and what moments mean, this was a great example. The look of fear in her eyes when he turned her around and started to gently caress her face and lay her back on the bed and actually kiss her on the lips. She was so deeply troubled and unsettled. You could tell in that moment that she had probably never been made love to in her life, that she had never really experienced tenderness from a man. And it was heartbreaking because you saw how bereft she has been her whole life of affection and tenderness. It was a great moment. It was a great piece of acting, and it was really revelatory to the character and to who she was. It was just a great acting moment. So if you've already seen the film, go back and watch that and be aware of it. And also the credits, the song she sings at the end credits, it's so alive in her. It's so deep. The meaning is there for her. It's another just excellent piece of acting from Andra Day. Now, I also want to go back and talk about Vanessa Kirby. I know I mentioned her last season briefly. Pieces of a Woman. I don't know if you know about the work that went into the first 24 minutes of that film, but that's done in one take. And she did that scene 6 times, all 24 minutes of it. The energy, the commitment, the bearing of her soul, it's one of the more vulnerable, one of the more visceral pieces of acting that I've seen. It was excellent. And this is coming from an actress who is not a mother. She's never given birth. But she did her research, talked to a hell of a lot of mothers. She actually watched a childbirth. And, she has said many times that, she wanted to do justice to the experience. And she did the right homework. And she committed fully. And it's an excellent, excellent performance. Now, if you want a really good example of what listening, answering, and responding is, what working with a point of view looks like, then you've got to watch One Night in Miami, Regina King's directorial debut. An excellent, excellent film. It's really well written. It's compelling. And, to see these 4 men, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, in a way that you don't normally see on film, to see a different side of them, to see them kind of separate from that kind of iconic presence that they put on for the world. And to hear them talk and engage in serious issues, each with a point of view, and the ability to listen to each other. It was just an excellent example. And certainly as a Meisner teacher, somebody who really believes that listening is the bedrock of acting, it's really well done. Leslie Odom, Aldous Hodge, Eli Gorey, Kingsley Ben-Adir, those four guys, great work. And you know what's interesting about Kingsley, if you didn't know this, he replaced the actor that was originally cast in that part, and he only had 14 days to prepare for that. 14 days to put that together. I mean, what can you say other than he did a hell of a job. A hell of a job. And, that film overall, I just thought it was really great to see black men possess vulnerability and to be able to see their humanity in full operation. I just thought it was a great film, worth watching. Frances McDormand in Nomadland. I think it's the best work she's done. I think it's better than Fargo. It's an incredible example of ease, simplicity. It's, she just exists. And, why I think it was even better than anything she's ever done before. Most of the people in that film, and this is what Chloe Zhao, the director, she does. She uses non-actors in a lot of her films. And most of the people that are in Nomadland are not actors. They are real people. And for her to blend in, to be still vivid, to be deeply nuanced and alive, but yet not get caught acting, first rate. Just real ease in that performance. I think it's exceptional. And Gary Oldman in Mank. I swear to God, this fucking guy, he is, I think, just one of the most transformational actors that we have. This guy, every single thing he does is a completely, fully realized human being. His portrayal of Herman Mankiewicz, the impediment work, the drunk work, wow. Talk about ease and fluidity. And, he had the voice, the walk, his comic sensibility. It was well written. It was well acted. And you can just see that this guy is acting and operating on a completely different level than everyone else. Amazing performance. Now, I did not particularly like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom as a whole. Okay? I thought it was a little bit too theatricalized for me. But Viola Davis, she's operating on a different plane. And you can just see it in that film. She is going to places that those other actors just can't go to. Exceptional work. What a great character. Fiery, fierce. And again, playing somebody that actually, lived. She really caught something there. I didn't think Chadwick Boseman, did that great of a job. Didn't blow me away. I think he's getting a lot more credit because of his untimely passing, but hey, it was a good film. I didn't really love all of the performances, and George C. Wolfe directed it. He's a theater director, and it's got that theatrical sensibility, especially since, of course, it was a play first. But it's worth seeing for her performance. And there are some films that, of course, always fly under the radar, that don't get nominated. They do not get the recognition that they deserve. And so I wanted to bring your attention to some films that I think you got to see that are not, getting the Oscar buzz. But I thought were still great films. One is the film Residue. And it's by the director Merawi Jarima. First-time director, grew up in D.C., and it's about this African-American family. This young guy comes back home. He's living in L.A., comes back to D.C., stays at home for a little bit, and it's his experience coming back home to a neighborhood that has started to become gentrified, and what that's like to have these privileged white people kind of just taking over their neighborhood slowly. But it's a great film, and it's really well told. The way the director uses flashbacks, the way, there's this one scene in particular where Jay, the main character, is visiting his childhood mentor who's in prison, and the director takes that scene, which you could have actually shot, in a prison, visiting room, and he imagined what it would be like for them to be in the woods, taking a walk on a sunny day and having this conversation. And it was just a great piece of storytelling. It was imaginative, and it made that scene just far more moving and more painful as a result. So Residue, great film. Next is this little gem of a film called Charm City Kings. It's based off of a documentary that came out in 2013 called 12 O'Clock Boys. It takes place in Baltimore, and it's about these motorcycle gangs and the unbelievable skill set these guys have of popping wheelies and just going 50 miles an hour down the street on one wheel and hopping up on their seats. And it's about this world, and the drug selling, and there's life on the street. Certainly, if you watch The Wire, you'll have an appreciation for the world of the film. But it was directed by Angel Manuel Soto, and the lead in this film, this kid, his name's Jahi Diallo Winston. He plays Mouse. I tell you, he captures so many sides of what it means to be an 8th grader. Being kissed for the first time, wanting to be treated like an adult, getting fed up with being a kid, and just being torn between two worlds. The world of growing up to pursue your dream of being a veterinarian, and the pull of making money and riding bikes and selling drugs. And it's just a really great film. Meek Mill's in it as well. He plays a paroled guy on the street, drug dealer, trying to change his life, turning it around, and you realize how he's connected to the character of Mouse in the film. But really, it's great storytelling. It's vivid, and the actress that plays the mother as well is first rate. It's a really good film by the writers Julia Hart and her husband Jordan Horowitz. It's called I'm Your Woman, and it stars Rachel Brosnahan, who you know as the lead in Marvelous Miss Maisel. I'll tell you, she does a 180 in this film. It's a thriller. It's an action thriller, and the whole idea of the film, the premise of the film, Julia Hart talked about it in an interview, was this idea of what if one of these, what's usually these movies that you see where it's all about the man, right? The crime boss, the world of the mafia, and the women in these films are often just side notes. You see them briefly. They're stereotypical and not really rewarding when it comes to the acting of it. But Julia said, well, what if one of these movies followed the women instead of staying with the man? And that's what's interesting about this film, I'm Your Woman. Because Rachel Brosnahan, she plays Jean. Her husband is involved in some serious, organized crime, and he is not even a secondary character. He barely is in it. It is about her and her experience and how she survives. Ultimately, a hit taken out on her husband. And she's got a really great moment in this film. When I talk about implanted meaning and the meaning of a moment and doing homework so that something vivid can happen to you, I mean, she is having a hell of a day, being shot at, running in the rain, being lost, being separated from her child. And I mean, she's just at a low point, and it's pouring down rain. And there's the scene where she walks in and she sits in this laundromat just to kind of get out of the rain. And she's just sitting there. And this old woman is sitting on the bench next to her, and she just slides over because she can see that Jean is really troubled. And the line that the woman asks her is, "Are you okay?" And you just see Rachel, her character, come to life. She starts laughing, and then that laughing just transfers over to this deep well of pain and grief. It's just a great moment. It's emblematic of an actor that's done some homework and is doing something interesting, creating some behavior that's not really there on the page. It's a really good film, worth watching. And one final film recommendation for you is the film Baby Teeth. It's an Australian film, and it's directed by Shannon Murphy, and it stars Eliza Scanlon, Toby Wallace, Ben Mendelsohn, and Essie Davis. And it's a story about a terminally ill teenager who falls in love with a drug addict who lives on the street, a kid who's a number of years older than her, who she meets on a train platform. And it is about how she navigates the remaining months of her life and this relationship with this kid. Well, he's a young man. And how she handles, her mortality. And Ben Mendelsohn plays her father. Essie Davis plays her mother, who's got a drug issue and has some great impediment work. It's a really great story. It's endearing. It's heartbreaking. And the acting is exceptional. And it's worth watching. A really good film. So those are my recommendations for films that are under the Oscar radar, if you will. Now, we've also had some deaths that are worth noting. Some really exceptional artists that have passed since the last we spoke. Three in particular that I'd like to point out. One is the great Cicely Tyson, who passed away at the age of 96. I'm sure you're all, are aware of her. We talk about Sidney Poitier being an icon for, the black actor and broke so many barriers, but Cicely Tyson is right up there. I mean, a 7-decade career. And she was very adamant in not taking any roles that would be demeaning or stereotypical of the black experience, right? Prostitution, drug dealing, marital violence, any kind of racist tropes that our film and television have trafficked in for so long. She wouldn't do it. And she didn't work as much because of that, but I'll tell you, she opened up so many doors and was a role model and a source of inspiration for so many actors and actresses that came after her. There are a couple of performances that you should be aware of, some films that you should see. I think the first is a 1972 film called Sounder. I think it's probably her most well-known film. And this came out in the era of those black exploitation films. And this was the complete opposite of that. She plays it's a period piece. It takes place in the 1930s, and she plays a woman who's really forced to save her family after her husband, who's a sharecropper, gets arrested for stealing food. And it's a film about resilience, about grit, about heart, about family, and it's just a wonderful film. And the other one is a television film, a made-for-TV movie called The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And she plays this woman who's 105 years old, grew up a slave, came out of that all the way up to the civil rights movement. And she plays her as a 105-year-old all the way back to her younger self. And the physical transformation, the vocal transformation, everything that she brought to that was exceptional, especially in 1974 when this movie was made. It's my favorite thing that she's done. And I think it's something that if you can find it and you can stream it somewhere, you must be able to do it. And the other thing that you should watch is Roots. She plays Kunta Kinte's mother. And it's, when that miniseries came out in the 70s, it rocked this country. It was such a visceral look at slavery and the atrocities of it. It's worth watching. So, Cicely Tyson. And, her autobiography just came out, which you should get. It's great. It's called Just As I Am. And, she wrote this in her 90s. And she is sharp as a tack. Her personality just pours through the pages. She's a great storyteller, and it's compelling. And I'm about 40 pages in, 50 pages in. It's worth adding to your library. Chick Corea, the great jazz pianist, passed away at the age of 79 a couple of months ago. I mean, he's one of the best jazz pianists of the last 50 years. His band, one of his first bands, Return to Forever, put out a lot of great albums. And if you ever find yourself late at night, you've done a couple self-tapes, maybe you've worked on your script and you need to unwind a little bit, 2 albums that you should listen to. One is Tones for Jones Bones, and the other one is Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. They're considered classics in the jazz world and worth listening to. He was a real force. Played with Miles Davis, too, for a long time. A couple of songs, Bitchin' Brew and In a Silent Way, are 2 of his collaborations with Miles Davis that are just, they're really fucking great. So Chick Corea, rest in peace. And Cloris Leachman passed away while we've been on hiatus here. And, Cloris Leachman had such a varied career. I mean, she could do serious drama. She was funny as hell if you've watched any of the Mel Brooks films that she's been in. My favorite is Young Frankenstein. She plays Frau Brewer, and every time you said her name, all the horses in the neighborhood would would scream out. She was very funny. She was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and there was a spin-off called Phyllis. She was just really, really talented. But there was one performance in particular that I want to talk about with Cloris Leachman, and it was really, I think, her iconic performance. It was in the 1971 film The Last Picture Show, which, to appreciate the history of film, you should definitely get this one watched. Peter Bogdanovich directed it, and it stars a real young Jeff Bridges. And she plays this housewife who's, lonely. Her husband, I think, died or left her. She's alone. She drinks, and she ends up having an affair with a high school kid, a teenager. And there's this scene at the end of the movie. It's the last scene of the film, and her character's name is Ruth Popper. And in this last scene, and you can get it on YouTube. I'll link it also on the website so that you can watch this. It's the scene where, he comes back after having kind of left her, abandoned her, and he shows up on her doorstep and knocks on her door. And, it's about a 3-minute scene. And the journey that she goes on, first it's the shock of seeing him when she opens the door and she lets him inside, and then this wave of anger, and she's throwing dishes, and all of the rage that she's wanted to unleash on him for leaving comes pouring out of her. And then from there, it's just the sadness of being broken and isolated, and you can just see how world-weary she is. And by the end of the scene, she's sitting there at the kitchen table with him, and they're looking at each other, and she puts her hand on his arm, and after all of it, it's the last words of the film. She says, "Never you mind, honey. Never you mind." And it's just a really first-rate piece of acting from a really good actress. So rest in peace, Cloris Leachman. Now, before we get out of here, a couple of things. One, I am now officially on the Free Britney bandwagon, okay? Let me tell you, I did not know what the fuck it meant. I kept seeing this hashtag Free Britney, and I rolled my eyes, I was like, what, these fucking kids, what are they talking about? And then I watched Framing Britney Spears, the New York Times documentary that you can stream on Hulu, and I was unbelievably disturbed. It's completely fucked up what is happening to her and what has happened to her. And, they show all these clips of her starting out and her fame and her music, and how the news media, pop culture, how all of us just took a big shit on her. Some of these interviews are so upsetting. In particular, Diane Sawyer and her interview with her. I mean, talking about, how do you think mothers should feel, and what you're doing to their children, and how can you live with yourself? And you look at how Justin Timberlake talked about her, and how everybody really dealt with her. Just obsessed with whether or not she was a virgin, with how big her tits were, of how much flesh she showed. And, she's a 20-something artist trying to make music, just trying to live her life, and brutal. And now to be in your mid-30s and not to have control of your life, of your personal decisions, over your finances, it's fucking crazy. So, free Britney, please. And I want to wrap things up here talking about an actor that I mentioned earlier on, Kingsley Ben-Adir, who most recently took on Malcolm X in One Night in Miami and did an amazing job with only 14 days of preparation time. There was a really great article in the New York Times that featured him, and he says some things that I think are really important. And here's the first quote. He said, "I felt like I was just making it up as I was going along, sometimes hitting, sometimes missing. And then I saw something I had done on television, and I felt so depressed by the work. I was like, is that it? All of the work that went into it, and that's what it was?" And I think that, I know certainly my students can understand that and appreciate that experience, and I'm sure a lot of you can, especially if you don't have a solid way of working, right? You can put a lot of hours, a lot of time into a script on a couple of pages and produce nothing, right? Have a director say, "That's no good." Have a teacher say, "What the hell is this? You have nothing." And you say to yourself, God, I spent so much time working. And Kingsley talks about his training. He went to the Guildhall School of Music in London. And, it's probably the equivalent to a BFA program here in the States. And he thought it was very stiff. He thought it was a very stiff technical education. And he said this, "The training I had and the training I dreamed about were two completely different things." And I think that there are so many actors that understand that. You take a class, you put a hodgepodge of stuff together, spend a lot of money, and you're like, I still really don't know what to do. I don't really have a real clear way of working. And he credits finding a really good coach out in L.A. His name's Victor Villarhauser. And he gives him a shout-out in the article. And I want to give Victor a shout-out as well, because Victor trained with me and Maggie as a teacher. He studied under Maggie as an actor. He's an incredible coach. And, he moved to L.A. a number of years ago and has been coaching actors out there. And Kingsley credits his work with Victor with, booking that job, getting him through that job, and just helping him with a process that will connect him to his humanity and a way of working. And, this is a guy now who is really in the game. You know what I mean? He's got offers coming at him. He's got scripts to read. He's got agents and managers and PR people working for him. I mean, he is carving out a career, but he still treats himself like a serious actor. And I want to leave you with one more quote of his, because it put a smile on my face when I read it, and hopefully it will spark something in you. And he said this: "Yesterday I had a teaching session at 9 o'clock on Zoom, and then I had a singing lesson, 4 hours of script reading, and 2 movies that I had to watch. How lucky am I?" Well, my fellow daydreamers, I hope that is a question that you ask yourself often. Thank you for sticking around, keeping that phone in your pocket. It's been a few months, and it is good to be back with you. Thank you for starting Season 2 with me. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a few seconds and you can review this show on iTunes, it would be fantastic. You can go to my website, creatingbehaviorpodcast.com, if you'd like to work with me privately, if you'd like the transcripts or the content to all of these episodes. You can follow me on Instagram at Creating Behavior, at Maggie Flanagan Studio. Lawrence Trailer, thank you for the music. I love it. My friends, stay resilient, play full out with yourself, and don't ever settle for your second best. My name is Charlie Sandlan. Peace.